Apologies from Councillor Filmer, and that I think is all. Notes from the last meeting. You've got some notes that have been prepared, the update on actions. Shall we just have a quick look at those? On 523, did you get a list of contacts from anyone?
Yeah, Vicky did, Chairman. Vicky, you might want to respond to that. Yes, we did.
Sorry, couldn't turn my microphone on there. Yeah, we received a list of those, and in the update I've said that we will now start picking up those contacts now that we've appointed a climate response engagement officer. That's the next phase of work. Yeah.
Okay. And where are we with that recruitment? I gather it's been advertised, isn't it? Well, not yet.
If I could come in there, please, Councillor Doe.
Yeah,
yes, we are pleased to inform you that we have a new climate response engagement officer, which is Katie Hargraves. She actually joined us on the Monday and as an intern, and then was appointed as the officer on Tuesday. So we're extremely pleased that she's joined our team as that new officer. On the second post, that's out for that's just being going through the interview process today. So we should have an outcome of that by the end of the week.
Brilliant. That's really good. Well done. And we've got a note here that planning we're going to find out if they've had any applications or many applications around car clubs, etc. Is there any news on that at all, Vicky?
Hi there, sorry, yes, so having liaised with the planning team, there's a bit further work they're required to start embedding the collation of that information in with the monitoring process that we've spoken about before, and then happy to give an update at the next meeting. There's a bit of further work there as well to just be checking in with the air quality officers as well.
Right, okay.
So you'll see on that point, Chairman, if I could just come in, Howard, thank you. That's just about ensuring we embed the capturing of that within our processes so that we can report to members on an ongoing basis.
Okay, that's fine. In that case, then I'll move on to, unless anyone else wants to raise any points. In that case, I'll then move on to the declarations of interest, if I may. And I'm afraid it's the usual ones. I will declare an interest as chairman of and director of Kindy and of Medway Development Company. And I'm sure that Adrian will declare his as the director of MDC. Are there any others?
Thank you for that, Howard. That's kind of.
And we of course rely on the dispensation that we've been given. Yeah. Okay. Well, assume then that there aren't any.
No, you've got indicating, Chairman.
Sorry?
No one else indicating, Chairman.
No, that's what I thought. Okay. Update on the action plan. Well, shall we go through this? What's happened here is that I asked Vicky whether she would pull out for me the actions that we'd said ought to take place in 21 and 22, so that we can then just focus. I think this is the purpose of we did say we do this regularly at the meetings. Actually, focus on where we are with each one. Now, I'll do this. I think the easiest thing I can do is probably to just ask for. You've got an update there, so you've got the low emissions strategy, which is we are continuing to engage with KCC and the Kent districts. We've had our first meeting together. You know, there is an interest and a realization. I think they first of all wanted to do their own thing and didn't like the idea much of the whole thing, but they come to appreciate, I think, the fact that bidding on your own as a thing, it's possible to get money, obviously, but you know, if we can bid, if when tranches of money come down from the heights, as it were, from government, and we have to craft that into a working bid. Now, if we only have one, but if we have 13 different bids or 14 different bids, it's not half as likely to command attention as if we have a strategic bid going all the way across Kent and Medway. equally, I also explained to them that this didn't mean that their pet project was not going to happen just because of that. You know, what we're saying is that we want to try to make sure that whatever it's possible to get, we get. And we get as much of it as we can, because there's always limited resources. The job is much, much bigger than the resources available. So we have to try to get that. And I think that was accepted generally. And we've agreed to meet again and also to form a working group that will actually work through this sort of liaison, so that when we do get announcements, first of all, they're spotted early. And secondly, we then consider who thinks they've got a scheme that will actually measure up to that. And then we will try to put that all together in a coherent bid. Okay, so that's where we are with that. So it's putting us really in the frame to, because I think what will happen here is you're going to get a lot of money with about three or 4 days in which to sort of put in the bid, complete with everything else. You know, it's HIF all over again, really. So there we are. The next item, 1.2, that's due to be progressed in the coming quarter, which we've on the first month, of course. But you'll see we made some progress with that, but that is ongoing work, of course. But the idea here is to make sure that we now know where we are. We've got the base. We then got to measure against that base, and then we come forward with proposals for ourselves, but also for the wider public, if you like, as to how we actually, particularly businesses, to how we can reduce those emissions. And you'll see I won't go through everything about these carbon emissions, but under 2.1 has any under 1.2, not 2.1, 1.2, has anybody got anything they would like to raise?
Chairman,
yep.
At the appropriate point, I had a general point I wanted to raise about the report, but I can do that at the beginning or at the end or whenever you think.
Well, let's deal with it now. Let's see if we can help.
Yeah, what it is, first of all, I think the format of this is excellent. Of course, it's evolved from day one.
Yeah, and it's still evolving.
And still evolving, and we acknowledge that, and it's highly impressive. So I say that up front. However, of course, as it's evolving, we're sometimes comparing very, very different types of projects here. And it's now quite a long list. So some things might be looking at a bit of paper saving somewhere, which of course is very important. And somewhere else, we're looking at an integrated transport plan, which has a huge impact. So I'm not suggesting a simple answer here, but hopefully officers at some point will come up with a format which allows us to organise it more constructively, so that we can see those areas which have the biggest impact on our climate in Medway, that we can presumably focus more time and resources on, and those which are really worthwhile but they're more symbolic and or whatever, however they want to cut it. But I think that we're reaching a point, in my view, where it needs a sort of a reformatting of some kind or another.
Yeah, Richard.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And just to let you know as well that Vince has indicated too, but if you're happy just for me to respond to Stuart.
Respond to that, and then Vince can come in next.
Okay. So thank you for that, Stuart. I think this is a point that's really well made, because we are trying to capture everything. You're right, there are some issues that are going to be far more significant for our collective endeavours here. So I wonder if in future it might be helpful, perhaps if we gave a bit of an overview, or so you've got all of the stuff here, so you've got that for completeness, but maybe Howard, in future, if you ask one of the officer team to just give an introduction where we can really touch on some of the bigger ticket items. And then, of course, if members have any questions on any of the other aspects as well, of course, we can do that. But I think Stuart's right, the danger of us capturing everything. We haven't got kind of relative.
Well, no, I wasn't intending to go to. Actually, I wasn't intending to take this forward like this. I think that what we wanted to show you was what was in the annual plan, and what we were doing about it. Now, I think what we'll do next time, if everybody is agreeable, is that we will take we've got 11 basic themes and I think we want an overview report on really on each of those subjects, and that's what we'll do. And then, of course, if anybody wants to we'll still keep this list going, as it were, behind the scenes, so that Vicky can have that available to us, so that if you've got any questions that drill down into that, because you don't think perhaps we'll make as much progress as we say we are, or there's something that's come up and somebody has said something or other, we've got that to fall back on, and that I think will help us to digest the information. But I just wanted you to see first of all, the totality of what's going on, which I think is very important because there's an awful lot of work going on. And secondly, just to make sure that you wouldn't think that we are, in fact, sort of quietly forgetting bits of it. We aren't, but we will do it. We'll do it that way, providing no one else has any objections to it. On the basis we shan't be concealing anything. We're just trying to make it more strategic.
That covers it perfectly.
Thank you, Vince.
Yeah, it follows on from that, actually, because I think look, this isn't a cabinet meeting or an overview and scrutiny meeting, so it is appropriate that things might look and feel a bit different. But actually, in one sense, and you've covered it in that previous question from Stuart, it is around saying actually some members will want to have the table we've got right now, so we definitely shouldn't lose that. But actually, I think an executive summary, we've got brilliant officers across the council, obviously Vicky and others leading this from a very specific focus as well. So I would appreciate them highlighting what they think are the things that we should, in their view, be looking at. And I'm sure we'll talk about those, but having this list as well, in the same way that for lots of other meetings, this council has you'll have an executive summary or a covering report.
Yeah, so I think having
both,
okay.
For today, of course, this is the first meeting since we've had the plan in place, actually. So in that sense, it's good to have that level of detail. I have got one or two small questions which I'm sure people will go, why on earth are you asking that? And that's fine, and we'll cover those as we go through. But I think moving forward, I think that would be helpful. But I wouldn't want to lose this. And the other thing, of course, is as we go through this, hopefully within even a meeting or two from today, we will have some where we've got things in place. And it's important actually for the papers moving forward that we show when that was achieved. It's important, we want to see things happening. I know all of us would want stuff to be happening more quickly, and there's legitimate reasons sometimes why time needs to be taken. But I think having that record, because at some point different people will be sat on this Teams meeting having this meeting. So actually, in that sense, the ability for people to look back and see how things have progressed, I think, is a good thing.
Okay, then what we will do is we will have a summary which actually deals with the important items, and so that's probably sort of a couple of pages, and then we'll attach this as a kind of appendix so that everyone can see it's still being kept up, and those that want to go in, dive into anything or feel that the particular point needs to be, then they can bring it up. I'll give you the opportunity to do that after we've discussed the executive summary. Is that all right? I think that meets everybody then.
That's fine. Can I then move to a question on 1.2?
Yes, of course.
And that's around fuel cards. And it would just be helpful. I'm sure this would happen, but just so someone can explicitly tell me, yes, it's going to, that the breakdown of fuel will be diesel, petrol, if we're still using petrol at some point, and of course, electric, and eventually hydrogen. So just making sure that we're clear, because the council will always use fuel. We will have to get around, but actually seeing that's a good example of actually seeing that progress. So I suspect the next report we have, if we can have a breakdown of types of fuel, 90+% will be petrol or diesel, of course. In 2 years' time, I would hope that figure will be substantially
somewhat smaller. Yeah.
So
that's fair enough.
Specifically, that would be helpful. Thank you.
I think that's quite easy to do, I would have thought, wouldn't you, Richard?
Yeah, no, that's fine as well. I don't think Vince necessarily needs a response immediately to that now. That's more about tracking our progress over time, isn't it, Vince?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Okay.
And you've got Simon Curry has just indicated, Chairman.
Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. Just coming in as well, just going through with 1.2. One of the things that's in there quite regularly, and in other areas of the action plan as well, is the idea of the monitoring, the continuous update. So, for example, you've got reporting annual carbon emissions. You've got various other things where data is being accumulated year on year. And in reality, we're never going to stop doing that forevermore. I mean, that's the whole point about this plan, is that sort of information we'll be seeking to gather and improve upon year on year for many years to come. So I think one thought that struck me as I was reading through this over the last couple of weeks is that at some point, as part of this, the evolution of this plan, is that will we be sort of devolving some of this work to other organisations such as universities? There's talk about interns being taken on and stuff like that. So some of this work cannot be done by officers forevermore, because it's sort of that ongoing monitoring work and ongoing work. So we'll be part of this action plan. Will we be looking at how we manage this over the long term? And universities came to mind straight away, but there are other companies who do this work as well, who could just sort of walk alongside us rather than it becoming the, I mean, I noticed that sort of the climate response officer comes up a lot down that list there, and I'm sure she's got plenty to do already without having to come into every single item. So I think that's something else that may be worth adding into the equation as well, as how we do this over the long term, that monitoring and accumulation of data side of stuff.
Yes, I think so. We may be able to pick up quite a bit of data actually, just from, in a sense, by computer almost. That's what I would aim at, and that's one of the things which I think perhaps Richard, we could get you and Ricky could take up with Paul Boyd, who's doing the sort of computer side of things, if I put it that way. He's doing transformation. And I just wondered whether we can look at that, see how, we need to make sure our gathering is as painless as it can be.
Yeah. If I could respond to that, Chairman, that would be helpful. I was reading something just last week or so around the University of Greenwich, which speaks directly to Simon's point. University of Greenwich are compiling a dashboard, so they are pulling together a number of metrics that they will be measuring and monitoring as part of that kind of wider Medway endeavour. So I think that's still at an early stage just yet, but that's exactly the kind of thing that science to.
Well, that was, of course, why in our communications and engagement strategy, we have actually allowed for a technical or provided for a technical committee, so that we actually do get this stuff. And we have, fortunately, got one of the most senior lecturers in this area, in Greenwich University, who's offered to sort of head that up for us. So I think what he will do is to call together his colleagues at that sort of level, and make sure that we harvest as much of this information as we can, bearing in mind, of course, that quite a lot of the collection of this information is really good background information for some of the work that the universities are doing.
Definitely.
Okay.
So continue with that piece of work, Chairman. And you've got Andy Stamp has now indicated. Howard.
Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. My question was in relation to carbon emissions more generally, in light of the pandemic, and whether we've made any assessment of how that has impacted on our carbon emissions as an organisation. So obviously the 1920 assessment would pretty much cover business as usual, apart from the last couple of weeks of March. But have we, as a council, get any assessment of the impact of the last year, 2021, on our carbon emissions, and what it's likely to look like in the future, and whether we've also captured the potential impact on emissions from home working as part of the council's emissions?
So Howard, you may wish to ask Lucy to pick that up.
Yes, I think so. It'd be very useful, actually. Lucy, would you mind dealing with that one?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Councillor Day. We've looked at emissions, I suppose, from generally in Medway with my air quality. hat on, and we've obviously seen that from the data we've looked at, the NOx levels have dropped. From Medway Council as a business, we will have the data for get the years right, 2021. We'll have that probably at the end of the summer, so we'll just be collecting that now, council building, and seeing whether we've seen a reduction in sort of power usage, less lights on, less computers. So we will have that information, but it'll come through probably September time, so we'll be able to bring that to the next members advisory board. With collecting, I suppose, emissions from working at home, that is going to be more tricky, I think, because it's not just going to be emissions from, as I use myself as an example, from me working at home. Because we were in lockdown, I also had my partner working at home and the 2 children doing home learning as well, so our electric bill would have obviously gone up considerably, and actually to tie that back to what I've used as an individual won't be as easy. So I think it's something we can look at going forward for sure, but we will have the information on the council's carbon footprint for the last year, probably at September, October, to share with everyone, and I would expect that we will see a reduction.
So I think it's very important actually that we get a general overview of it as far as we can, because what I want to try and do, and I'm sure it's in Andy's mind as well, is to actually say, look, here we were burning 100, if you like. We've now gone down quite painlessly to say 50 as a result of the benefit. Let us not go back to the 100. So if we start seeing that it's going back to, so we say, the next reading after the pandemic, people are released, comes back to 75, then quite clearly we've got to try to do something about it. I think that what we ought to do is to take the pandemic level as being the one we would like ideally to aim at, and then try and see if it goes significantly above that, as it may do to start with, then we'll have to work very hard on how we can reduce that and what we learn from that. Okay, right, shall we move on? I think really we've covered quite a lot of the issues in point 2. Really, if there's any others that you would like me to cover, I'm quite happy to do it. You'll see there that we have actually we're actually sort of making quite a lot of progress against that. Inevitably, as you say, we're still forming up the climate change team. We've got we're doing quite a bit with very limited resources at the moment. Those resources will increase, not vastly, but they will increase. And of course, we've actually garnered quite a lot of goodwill from various parts of the organisation who've been helping us to do this work because they believe in it. So that's.
Howard.
Vince, sorry, I don't know why, but your hands are not showing in here. And sorry, so if you can, Vince.
Yeah, thanks very much, Howard. It's just I've got a point on 1.3, and there isn't a 1.3 in the first column, so I was going to pick it up now, which is on 1.3.2. And this, in some senses, goes back actually, for those who can remember, all the way back to when Andy moved and was supported on a cross-party basis on the issue of single-use plastic, and the ability of Medway Council to influence, whether with soft or hard influence, Medway the place. And I recognise obviously there is some progress because we're meeting with other public sector partners, and that's of course to be welcomed. But I just wanted to explore whether there's been any. And I recognise, of course, we've had conversations with public transport providers. I'm very aware of that. But more generally, in the wider private sector and the voluntary sector, just whether we've started that conversation. Now, again, I recognise, of course, everyone's been dealing with the pandemic, but I just want to get a sense of feeling as to whether there's been any initial conversations, any thought processes around engaging with the other 2 sectors. It looks as if there's a good dialogue starting in the kind of public sector of Medway, but the voluntary sector and the private sector, how can we ensure we are strongly encouraging them to do the right thing when it comes to climate and biodiversity?
Well, I can answer that to a certain extent. I'll leave the officers to come in, but basically, we are working, as you know, with the towards plastic-free Medway, and they have actually managed to get quite a few commitments. For example, this week they actually got a commitment to this programme from the NHS. And they're actually, you know, and they've got an officer now who is their sort of eco officer, if I put it that way. And she is very much keen on this, and she is actually going to join the committee of the organisation, and possibly some of ours as well. We can get her on. And I think that this is the sort of thing I mean, there's no question about it. There is a system that they're using towards plastic-free Medway of actually getting allies. And allies mean they sign up to a commitment. Now, we've done quite a bit of helping of introducing them and so on and getting them in. So actually, they are working very closely with us on making people aware of the use of plastic. So I'd say we've made considerable, from my own experience, we've made considerable strides in that. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to pick up Vince's wider point around influence that we can bring to bear, I kind of said that the team were embarked on a series of road shows. So there's a presentation that we have given to a number of audiences, not least the place champions. So that was a collection of 60 people there that represented business, voluntary sector, as well as public agencies as well. And the team's also given a presentation to the Child Friendly Medway Partnership Board, which involves health sector colleagues, police, and the like. So we will continue to spot those opportunities, Vince. You're quite right. This is a collective endeavour across Medway. We'll continue to spot those opportunities to have those discussions and push some of those messages as well.
That's really helpful. If I just come back on that quickly, 2 points, I guess, really. One is to say, look, I recognise entirely at the moment, still for lots of organisations just existing with the challenges of the pandemic, it is hard enough. So someone wanted to talk about climate emergency, although it's really important, actually, I get that it may not be their priority right now, but that's not to say it won't be in the very near future. So I wonder if there is and again, perhaps an agenda item for the next meeting, some consideration about holding a Medway-wide convention, a one-day event, just to say, actually, this is really important, not least with all the other things that we're wanting to do from a council perspective, City of Culture, child-friendly, city status. But even if we weren't doing all of those things, it would still be the right thing to do. The second bit that kind of sits allied to that, and I can see Adrian Golvin is the next to come in, so he may want to comment on this himself, is just where we are with climate emergency being recognised in the procurement process for Medway Council, because again, that is where we can take a slightly more harder rather than soft approach to say, actually, give us your climate emergency credentials and we'll consider them in the same way. You know, I've been very proud as a Medway councillor to be able to say our procurement strategy recognises providers recognising the White Ribbon campaign. So, you know, that's somewhere where we can have a pretty direct influence. But I say, I note Adrian is next to speak, so he may obviously want to cover that himself, I guess.
Well, Adrian, would you like to come in?
Yes, on that point, at the moment, the only real emphasis we're putting on that would bear on the climate change is our strong emphasis on using local suppliers if possible, because that obviously reduces the length of the supply chain. The social value element of it, I think, is something we need to increase. At the moment, it's only 5% on the scoring, because we work on a mixture of price and a value assessment along with social valuing. But you know, whilst that 5% doesn't sound very, very large, in a practical sense, though, some of the when you actually come to add up all the scorings, they come pretty close often. And often that 5% of the social value does make a big difference. But having said that, I think we do need to look at it a bit more closely and make sure that we do put this the environment more firmly into the picture. So that's all work in progress. And talking about work in process under 211, or we talk about climate change, including a refreshed council plan. I've arranged to meet with Anna Marie Lawrence in the next few weeks, and we're going to talk this through and see also talk about what KPIs we want to actually put in.
That'd be very useful.
Plan, so how we score it. So that's I think a crucial thing to do. Also under 2.1. 2.110, it talks about smart city and emerging smart city strategy. And interestingly, something came up at the transformation board yesterday morning, which sort of refers, which could connect to something a bit later on in this. So we talk about looking at road conditions to try and prevent flash flooding and that. There's a fantastic scheme we're piloting at the moment. We've actually got road monitoring equipment put on 2 of our refuse vehicles and a couple of other vehicles, and they're constantly monitoring the condition of the road. So I think, to look for blocked gullies and areas when it's raining that are not clearing quickly enough. I think that's something that could be incorporated into that technology. So there's a lot of things with the smart city stuff that's going to come forward, which we can adapt to make things better. And I see Richard's indicating there, so Richard wants to follow on from what I've just said. I'll be there are a few things I'd like to come back in again later on. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, that's Howard, fine. Yeah. Sorry, do you want to come in now, Richard, or shall we take Simon next?
I'm in your hands, Chairman. I'll do it quickly, shall I? Just to pick up this point. So one of the things that Vince was talking about there was whether we have a kind of Medway-wide session. When we get on to the communications and engagement. Yeah,
exactly. We do envisage that, don't we? But
exactly that. That's exactly right.
What I think we've got to do, I think what we have to do, the next sort of stage, certainly when we come to communication, we've got to get to a point where it isn't a question of the public marking the council's paper. It's all collaborating together, and rather as we're doing the arts, actually, to make sure that we instead challenge each other. Because as you've often seen, it's it isn't easy for us to do it. We can't do it all on our own. There are large areas we don't control, or indeed don't want to control. But I think we put our own house in order first, which is what we're doing, and we're well advanced with that. And then the next stage, I think, in that is to then we go and we say, right, well now let's see if we, who else can do this? Who are our natural champions? Who can see, as I'm sure some firms will, particularly firms like Norse and so on, will actually see the benefit of being known as people who actually champion the green agenda. Anyway, Simon.
Thank you. Just picking up on a couple of points before I mention my main point, which I was going to come to. Just picking up where Vince was talking about getting this sort of ways of getting this message out there. One of the things that we've been finding, particularly within sort of the voluntary side of things, it's not really the willingness is there. People do want to change. People are desperate to change almost, and they really want to engage in it. It's the how. And I think that's one of the questions. And I know that we all work as well with plastic-free Medway. There are plenty of companies that would love to reduce the amount of plastic, non-recyclable plastic they use. They just don't know how. And when plastic-free come in and tell them how, that then has its benefits to it. And I think it's the how rather than the willingness. We're pushing an open door with so many businesses and voluntary sectors, and also within the council, obviously, as well. It's just telling them how, and I think that's part of the messaging. And I know we're coming to communications a little later in the meeting, but one of the things that's mentioned right at the end within the 12-month thing is this climate summit. And I was just wondering whether that could almost become a climate event of some sort, where with fringe events on different sort of interest groups are telling people how they can reduce the amount of car mileage they use, how they can reduce their plastic, how many more trees they need to plant to offset their carbon footprint. We could have a number of fringe things around that summit next year that would be quite beneficial to a lot of organisations and businesses in Medway, but perhaps we can come to that later on.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to pick up in that respect then in 2.1, where you're talking about embedding things within the sort of council plan and stuff like that going through. One of the things that's worked well in other areas of promoting sort of change, managing change, is the idea of introducing some sort of competition in a sort of light-hearted way, rewards and awards for stuff. So if the different parts of the council were competing with each other, who could be greenest, who could have the lowest carbon footprint within the next 6 months, and then they get some sort of reward as a result of that, it might be worth introducing something like that within this sort of part 2.1 section of the report.
Well, I think we need, I agree with that. I think we need to think about that in the terms of the communication policy. So can we keep that thought, and we'll make sure that we get onto it when we do the communication side, okay? Can we then move on, please, to the planning side, and where you'll see there that there seems a lot of work that's being done, but of course not all of it is well, let's just say that the policies are being developed, but I've yet to see the evidence. I'm sure they are being developed, but we need to check that area, and I'm relying really upon Vicky and Lucy, where they can check this area for me to make sure these plans really are being sorted out, and that we are, more importantly, not just simply that they're there, but in fact they are robust and reasonable, and we're able to look at them, because once they're in the local plan, if you like, it's going to be quite difficult to alter them.
Would you like me to comment on that, Councillor Doe?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank
please.
you.
Thanks, Heather.
We use one of my favourite words in terms of robust. We'd have the plan done years ago if it didn't have to be robust. and challenged. So there is a lot of work being done. This is obviously one area of the local plan in relation to the actions that have been recorded under the section 3 in the document, which is largely focused around energy, climate change mitigation. But so they will be reflected within the plan in terms of specific policies that will sit in a number of sections, critically the energy sections, but also transport and development. Will also be within the vision and the strategic objectives for the plan, recognition of climate change, and one of the driving ambitions for the plan is to address the environmental imperatives that sit upon us. So I'd like to reassure you that work is being done. It does sit across the whole of the document, and because of the way in which a number of the evidence-based documents come together late in the process, it does mean it's really difficult to actually release material early because of the processes we work to. And one of the last pieces of the work which is being done is the Sustainability Appraisal, which is it measures all the policies and the development allocations against a number of objectives and markers. They will include the impacts, whether they're positive, negative or neutral in relation to climate change issues, and also the viability assessment sits quite late in the process as well. So again, we need to ensure that we're not inadvertently actually stymieing development coming forward in Medway. Obviously, we need to hit that right balance between being ambitious and delivering change, and being very clear about our expectations for how we can build better in Medway in the future and support people to have healthier lifestyles. But we need to ensure that that doesn't inadvertently actually stymie development being delivered, because if it does, then the inspector will take those policies out of the plan, and we need to ensure that we can deliver on what we say we want to do in the plan. So we will be sharing that information with colleagues in environmental services. Vicky and colleagues have been feeding information already, but we'll ensure that obviously this information is shared with members of this group as well.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Thank you. Unless anyone has any particular questions on that, we'll now look very quickly at the funding and budgeting side of it, the financial side. Are you waiving? Oh yes, sorry. Stuart, I've got, yes.
Sorry, I'm assuming we're looking at paragraph 3. I'm looking at 3.1.2, and I just one thing that a small concern with the planning aspect of this is that, of course, as a member of the planning committee, our job is to assess the plan in front of us and not what we necessarily would like it to be, and we have to do that according to the rules and the laws and so on. So I just feel that we can use lots of fine words in this area, but our hands are very often tied by the laws and rules and things that we can actually do. And unfortunately, it's a problem that we always face in planning, that people have a much higher expectation of, why do you allow this? Why do you do that? Why? And we are bound by the obviously.
Yeah, you're not mastering your own house. I know that.
No, and I just wanted to reinforce that point, this being an important public meeting, that it's not as easy as some might think for us to control everything that we would like to control, if indeed we were kings and queens of Medway and we could just make our own laws. Unfortunately, we don't. And there's so many constraints. I just wanted to put that caveat, without wishing to be negative. It is incredibly difficult within planning where that rubber hits the road.
No, I think you're right, and I think we all recognise that. But I think the important point is to push as far as we can. But anyway, now if we move on now to the funding side of things. You'll see there that we have actually increased our allocation to 21-22, and we won't be making the budget really until the next time that we meet. We'll have some sort of draft for you at that point of what we intend to do to strengthen or to take on various resources. In other words, it probably won't be so much staff then as actually arrangements that we've got to make, to take this out to the public, etc. So we'll have to give that prime thought, really. But apart from that, we have, as you see there, we've expressed interest in the programmes that have been available to us, and I think, Richard, we're continuing to do that, aren't we?
Yes, we are, Chairman. So I think it's quite important to say, let's not forget that we have got the £11 million of LED street lighting programme that's underway. Yeah. Agreed just the other day, £12 million of refit investment into our buildings. So whenever there are opportunities for us to apply for external funding, of course we will seek to do that. And we do think there will be some opportunities in the run-up to COP26 in November time. So there could be further announcements of...
There must be.
From government. So it's not only the council funding that we put into the core team, it is about looking for those external funding opportunities. And of course, as you rightly encourage us on a daily basis, Howard.
Yes.
External funding allocations as well.
Okay.
And Adrian is indicating as well, Chairman.
Right, Adrian.
Yes, Richard's really stolen my thunder a bit there, because I wanted to mention the two bits of funding that's actually gone through. There was the smaller chunk which went through Cabinet for 2-point-something million, which is phase 1 of the refit programme, and because we want to move quickly on it, that actually went through as a matter of urgency, because some of the stuff there, we want to try and get the heating equipment changed before it's needed in the colder weather later in the years. So that is actually moving at quite a pace. And then we've got another big tranche that has been is going to go into the capital programme. So that's stage 2, 3 and 4, and that brings it up to about as Richard said, about 12.5 million. So there's a big commitment there. And the other interesting thing that we're talking about is with SSE is the district heating system, and if it comes to fruition, that could be anything up to £40 million of private money coming into Medway to help make us more efficient. So there's some really good stuff going on there. But as Richard said, it's a matter of grabbing the opportunities they come along. So we've got that 12.5 million that's sort of there that we're going to spend, but the opportunity to lever in other funds is there. And we're just going to grab at the opportunities as they come along, as Richard said.
Okay. Well, I think at this stage we've done all we can on this, but we've got to keep. This is going to be the most active part probably of what we're doing, the most high level active part. And I'm convinced, like Richard, that there's an awful lot of money available if we really go for it.
Chairman,
okay.
Simon.
Yeah, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to, this is a point that I probably raise at most meetings that we have, is about natural capital calculations within our, 4.3 robust financial strategy. It has to include this because, all the big metropolitan centres have done these calculations now, and the benefits that come out of this work in terms of cost savings down the line are huge in terms of people's health and well-being, and also in terms of investment and stuff like that, because people want to live in the cleaner, greener areas, and that brings in work and the business as well. So if we could please incorporate natural capital calculations and the green accounting into this element of the action plan, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Would you like to comment on that, Richard? Can we do some of that?
Yes, so I think that raises a really interesting point, actually, that this plays into wider agendas, doesn't it? So if we are thinking about places that people want to live, places where people want to establish their businesses, if we have an environment that is a positive one, that's a conducive one, with our climate change ambitions, that then encourages other people to move into the area. There's then a kind of wider beneficial aspect. And that goes far beyond just the straight line thing around, well, actually, if you've got solar panels on the roof, it means your electricity is cheaper. That is undoubtedly the case. But what Simon is actually pointing to there with the natural capital calculations is a much more strategic consideration of those wider benefits. So we would certainly want to factor that into our thinking. Simon's taken a very strategic leap of that particular action, which is about ensuring the medium-term financial strategy. We've got an allocation in to fund the activity in the action plan, and there's a corporate management team discussion tomorrow where we are discussing the medium-term financial strategy, and my point will be ensuring that we have got full inclusive allocation needed. Members will report from the cabinet report. There's funding required just to deliver the actions we have in the action plan. We will certainly do that, but these wider strategic considerations that Simon pointed to are really valuable and really useful. We're trying to put that into our thinking as well. Thank you. Okay,
well, I think it would be very helpful if we could bring up a note to the next meeting on how we intend to go about obtaining this information. Possibly we can learn from other councils as well. There are bound to be others that are doing this, but rather more, perhaps, more advanced with that particular thing than we are.
Just to quick dive in there, I've got quite a substantial amount of work on this myself, just in sort of data stuff, so I can certainly provide some information on that as well. That's no problem.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. Vince, did you want to come in here?
Yeah, really. Thank you very much, Howard. Firstly, and this is the speech I probably would have given Thursday if I hadn't been pinged last week around refit, and this is a wider point. I mean, certainly, you know, both main political groups voted for the refit funding last week. It's the right and proper thing to do. I just have a slight nervousness, I guess is the phrase I would use, around the payback for that. The problem sometimes with some of these schemes, if you're looking to go into partnership with private sector partners in particular, is they may not always be exactly as they seem, particularly in a developing market like the desire to upgrade buildings for the purposes of tackling the climate emergency. So I throw that in just to say we always need to, you know, I think most councillors would support, where appropriate, prudent borrowing for a scheme of that nature, but borrowing needs to be repaid. So I would have said that Thursday night if we were allowed to do this, which is nonsense that we can't. My second point, and I will not mention the building. I am aware, because I've asked other officers, but I'm not sure if it's in the public domain. There's a cabinet report going to the next cabinet meeting around the acquiring of a building that is in the public domain. My understanding is some of that building will be for residential. I would want to see the council looking very proactively. We should have a flagship example of residential which has got the very best climate credentials, and I would be saying actually the potential acquisition, which again I won't mention, but if it can be in the public domain, it would be helpful if someone like Richard Hicks was happy to mention that, or not, as the case may be. Thank you very much. That's a very clear steer. Thank you, Richard. If that's agreed by cabinet, then I would want to see that residential element being very, very top end when it comes to the issues of its climate credentials. And I think there'll be lots of different opportunities for that. I will leave it at that point. Happy to have a conversation offline. But again, obviously, that is something which the residents of Medway will be looking on when that cabinet report is considered. Thank you very much.
Did you want to comment, Richard?
Thank you, Chairman. And you've got Adrian coming on next as well, because I'm sure that Adrian would want to say that actually throughout any of our developments that we progress, and certainly as you and Adrian are very aware around splashes, where we said that to absolutely enshrine all of our climate change ambitions in the way we deliver that scheme. Certainly, Vince, you're absolutely right. We would want to build that into our approach around any of our developments. And I think, so I don't want to misquote you, Andy, but I think Andy said at council that we need to be very conscious of our sort of property estate, as it were, in terms of the investment that we're making into our buildings. And that is absolutely right. Anything that we are doing as the council, that is where we can show some leadership in our approach. And that is absolutely the approach that we'd adopt across our property estate.
Yeah, I agree. And I can endorse that from the development company as well. With, as far as I know, based upon the fact that actually it doesn't give rise to any recoverable costs anyway, I think we're building that in as far as we can. I had conversations with Lewis about that. Adrian.
First of all, on the refit programme, if you read the papers, the report that went with that, we're aiming for a 20% return on our investment, which is pretty good under any circumstances, considering we are borrowing money at the Public Works Loan Board's rate, including the repayment element at 2%. So that's a pretty good return on our investment. And before we've embarked on any of these schemes, we've been over it with a pretty good slide rule, and to make sure it does stack up. And it was written into that report that went to full council on Thursday for the remaining stages. Those targets have to be met, or the funds won't be released. So there's no danger of us going down the road of putting money in for the sake of it and we won't get a return. if we don't get a good return, we won't do it. It's as simple as that. As far as redevelopment opportunities in Chatham and energy efficiency is concerned, Howard made the point, is absolutely right, that the MDC programs that we're building at the moment are pretty good as far as energy efficiency is concerned. As the only caveat I'd put in about if we were trying to make a flagship scheme out of any of these is when you're making regeneration as on brownfield sites, as we are in Chatham, the margin that you've got is very, very slim indeed. In fact, you've only got to, as we have done on Chatham Waterfront, come across difficult ground conditions, and your contingencies can disappear very, very quickly. So whilst it will be really, really good, and I'd dearly love to be able to turn around and say, yes, we are going to have schemes that will be flagships as far as energy efficiency is concerned, we've got to weigh into the balance all the other factors. And
yeah, we do.
Yes, it's far easier to do that on a greenfield site, where the profit margins are considered, particularly if you've got the advantage of being able to get land that is not ready already with planning permission, because the biggest gain that a developer can get out of his building work is not actually building the homes, it's actually on the increase in land value for once planning permission for residential can be applied. Whilst there is a slight gain from changing from office or retail use to residential, it's often quickly swallowed up with the extra costs that are involved in town centre. And the main benefit of the regeneration for the centre of Chatham is actually getting people living and working back into our town centres again. And that in itself has energy efficiency, because if people haven't got to drive to work, they can walk from home to the railway station at Chatham and get the fast train. Instead of getting in the car and driving around the M25 for an hour and a half every morning and evening. I mean, so there are some benefits there. I think inner city living is more energy efficient in this way. You can, if you're living in the town centre, you can do your shopping in Sainsbury's, and walk backwards and forwards. So there's that. But whilst yes, I'm very happy to have a discussion on future potential property acquisitions in Chatham, but I've got to put that caveat. It's not as easy as it first sounds. Don't want to be negative.
Okay, can we leave it there, because I think the point is made, and we've got a lot to get through today. Okay. Right. Now we then obviously would need. I'm just going through this as quickly as I can. The charging points you will see for electric vehicles are now getting seriously into that program, and we're getting 34 installed, and that's all happening as we speak. So I don't know if anyone has got any more discussion. I don't know, when is the current parking standards, policies, arrangements and all the rest of it, when is that review going to be complete? Because it just simply says discussions in progress, and I know it's been going on for quite a while, hasn't it?
So, Chairman, we've got Paul Boyd is on the call, so he'll be able to answer some of those questions, I suspect. But meantime, the dashboard is lit up, so you've actually got Stuart, Simon, Gary and Vince. So
right.
Whichever order you want to take that in, but maybe give Paul a bit of space to think about the answer, go through it, and he'll pick that up afterwards. Okay,
Stuart, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point really regarding the progress, and obviously I've been reading the reports that have been coming through recently, and some of the places where we're EV charging points going in, which is all, of course, very good news. Although one resident did point out to me that as a borough, we are still falling behind many other areas in the southeast and in the country. Now, how do we feel we are doing compared to others? Is it just nothing to worry about? Are we going to be catching up, or is this something that we're very content with our rate of progress?
Well, I think it's actually we're already tied up into a contract, are we not, with KCC, which will have various phases to it. So we're not. This is not it. This is merely part of the overall thing. But Richard, did you want to comment?
Thank you, James. To directly respond to Stuart's point, because we do like a bit of competition. So the guys gave a presentation to all of Kent leaders just last week. So KCC, all the district councils, and it was us, it was Medway that was presenting on this issue about EV charging, low emissions. We were held up as an exemplar across the county. Now, that's not to say there isn't more that we shouldn't be doing. Of course we should. There's much more that we want to do as well. But in terms of the kind of progress we are making at this stage, I think we are doing pretty well, given the kind of standing start that we've made, and we will want to continue on with that. But you're
it's not an end program. It's a starter program, really.
Correct. We're in a wider set of arrangements across the county as well.
Yes. Yeah. I suppose my broader point is hopefully it's not just what we're doing, but we're benchmarking ourselves against the very best, as we always do, I am sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, okay, well, I think that's perfect. That's a perfectly valid point, and we will continue to benchmark ourselves. And I think that's something that Vicky can make a note of, she would, and make sure that is done. Simon, sorry, you want to come back again?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. Just picking up, you didn't actually touch on, and apologies for dragging us slightly backwards. I just want to go back to 5.1 in relation to the landlord's regulatory system in terms of that. I mean, one of the things I picked up from that was that it was basically a complaints-led question there, and I'm just wondering how effective that would be, bearing in mind the problems that we have with landlords generally. A lot of them aren't even complying with the basic standards that they're supposed to apply to rented accommodation, never mind doing energy efficiency on their boilers and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering if there's any way we could perhaps move away from simply a complaints-based approach to that and link it to energy suppliers, to any kind of sort of spot check monitoring and stuff like that, that we could be more proactive in how we tackle the issue of getting sort of existing properties up to standard as well as new and stuff like that. So there's just a brief point on that one, but I'll move off that now because I appreciate the time is fairly tight. In relation to EV charging, absolutely brilliant. I mean, I'm in favour of everything about this, but one of the consistent questions, and I don't have an answer to this, is the Victorian terraces and how we tackle that issue. I'm just wondering whether, again, looking back to the University of Greenwich, maybe is it worthwhile looking at trying to get some research commissioned into how we tackle that problem of what we do with our extensive areas of Victorian terraces and how they could possibly be charging cars in those areas. I don't know. I haven't got an answer to it. I'm just putting the question there because it does come up a lot in meetings outside of this board meeting. Okay, thank you.
I think we can ensure that's fed into the wider discussion, can't we, Richard?
Yeah, I think that's right. We had, excuse me, Chairman, we had a conversation at RCE ONS the other evening where Stephen Hubbard was talking particularly about Strood North, the challenges of Victorian terrace streets and how you get into charging. Actually, some of the technology, so Simon was at that meeting, some of the technology is about plates underneath the road. So rather than needing to plug into a lamppost, because you can imagine you can't have wires trailing over roads. And then I'm sure, you know, somebody would wake up at 2 a.m. once their car has been charged and move it so the next person can get in. I just cannot see the practicalities of that if I'm honest. So that is going to be much more about, so where are the locations where you can go to get this charged? This is a national issue, of course. We're not alone in the face of
no.
And there will be a response of the market. The government will want to act in this space. The market will want to respond in this space, and the technology will respond too. So Councillor Thompson, who's not on the call, but he was talking about these plates that are under the road that do the sort of super quick charging. You know, maybe that will be the solution. I think There's just a little bit of a turn of the wheel that is required here, Chairman.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Gary.
Thank you, Howard. Just keeping on the electric charging theme, we had the pilot of the social workers' cars about a year ago now. Could we have some feedback in this committee of how many hours they've done or miles they've done, how the users found them easy to use or didn't find them, were they going there always empty? So before we sort of trundle off the road down the road of electric vehicles everywhere, let's get a review of that pilot first and understand, you know, how useful it's been. The second thing on electric.
Well, okay, we can gather that information, can't we, Richard?
Well, Paul Boyd is on the call, so he will be able to give a bit of a response. We discussed this at Transformation Board yesterday as well, so if Paul is there and able to come back on that, would be
right. Okay, Gary, continue if you would, and then I'll get Paul to pick that up.
On electric charging, and we see in some of these, you mentioned right at the outset of this section about our policies. I was amazed, to be honest, at planning last week. A new country park came up in the Saxon Shore Way, Hugh Peninsula Way, which Medway is bringing forward. And out of the nearly 100 car parking spaces, we were only going to provide 2. Now, if we want to show leadership, I don't think that sends a very good message. That we're building a brand new greenfield car park and we're putting 2 electric charging points in out of nearly 100 spaces. So are we really serious about this, or are we just talking about it because it's a good thing to talk about? I'm beginning to wonder, actually.
Right, I think we need to look into that. That's a specific. Can you take that on, please, Richard? Make sure that Peter Garrett has a look at that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that, Chairman.
Okay, fine. Okay, so the answer to your question is yes, we are serious. At least at this level, we're serious, and the officers, I think, make that should also follow that lead. But anyway, can I now get Paul Boyd in?
Just as an update on the 34 chargers, the installations at Station Road in Rainham and Commercial Road in Strood have been completed, and work on Rochester multi-storey starts next week, which will give us 34 electric chargers, which will be live by the end of August. And then you're absolutely right, there is an extended project linked with Kent for additional chargers. We anticipate that will be an additional 132 chargers, and feasibility studies across Medway's 33 car parks are currently underway. And then that will come to procurement board once we know that the network, the power's all in place. So the feasibility work is underway, but we do anticipate an additional 132 on top of the 34 already.
Okay, well, can we then look, please, at the Cookham green area, because I think we need to look at that and our other country parks. Actually, it's something we ought to just check over. Can I get you to do that for us? We'll start that. Thank you.
And do we have any information on the 6 pool cars, Paul, while you're on?
Sorry, yes. So the pilot's been constantly reviewed, and originally it was for children's social workers. Now that we're looking at other areas that would like to make use of the cars, we're balancing that across other services. So that's
what's the feedback on it?
So
What's the feedback on it?
Good. They're available. Obviously, the pilot was put in place before COVID, so there's a lot more homework in than when the pilot was originally put in place. But we'll definitely pull together some stats for the next meeting.
And the other thing is, are we going to continue with that pilot? You know, in other words, are we going to broaden that out? I mean, if we learn from the pilot that it's a very good thing to do, then how do we actually build that into the mainstream work?
So that's part of the wider, it's in the action plan, but some wider work around the council's current vehicle fleet and the grey fleet is ongoing alongside. So it isn't a one-off pilot. We are looking.
Okay, I wanted just to highlight that. Thank you. Okay, Vince, did you want to come in?
Yeah, a couple of points really. I agree with Gary on the park that was at planning last week and seeing 2% of parking spaces being electric cars charging points was a surprisingly low number, bearing in mind where it is. It's quite difficult to walk to from lots of places, So I would encourage to see if we could get some further information on that, recognizing, of course, and I can see the comment in the chat, of course, this isn't about comparing with existing country parks. This is a brand new country park, so we should be the exemplar. And I'm always concerned, and I know Andy raised this a while back, actually, when we were talking about the procurement process for LEDs, that Brighton and Hove, our nearest comparator council, 200 charging points. We are not there. We should be getting towards that much more quickly than we are. My second question is around, and obviously it happens to be a supermarket today, but Morrison's have announced that they're going to put in 100 sites with super fast charging. I just wanted to get a sense of feeling, when something like that is announced, does this council make representations to say, can we have one of those in Strood or Princess Park, please? Ironic, the two places we have Morrison's, I guess, with everything else going on at the moment, Strood and Princess Park. But, even if we were to get it at one of those two sites, that is, again, it's not necessarily about the council delivering everything, but encouraging others to make sure that they're delivering for Medway as well. So would we, that's been announced today, would this council this week be writing to Morrison's to say, fantastic news, we urge you that one or two of those sites are within Medway?
Right, can we make sure that is done? I entirely agree with that. I don't know whether, I assume that we haven't actually, because there's so many other things that we've got on, but I think this is quite important, and we need to build that in. So can I ask Vicky to make sure that is actioned, please, and that's brought into us, not just for Morrison's, but for anywhere else. What I suggest we do is to look at the 3 or 4 major supermarket people who are in town, and actually ask them whether they're intending to provide any, and if they are, could they please make sure that Medway is included, because we want to be included. I think by doing that, we might be able to get them get slightly ahead of the field, as it were.
Yeah.
So can we do that, please? That could be finishing. Right, slogging on, because I'm determined to get you to the communication strategy before you all die of old age. If I can move now to the past the section 6 and go on to I think heat mapping, we are well into that, and I don't think there's a lot to be said about that at the moment, is there? All right. And then we've got the new community growing spaces. Well, really, we are looking very closely at allotments. We're conscious that there is a long waiting list. I've asked specifically Peter Garrett whether he will, and he is doing it, I know. We'll look into what allotment spaces we can add to at the moment, and that's got to be done in time to be built into next year's capital programme, Richard, please, on allotments. And also we've gone to all the allotment holders that are not keeping up their plots as well as they might, and they've been asked whether they want to actually downsize, so that we can let 2 half allotments, if I put it that way, and that way we can help with the demand. So that's getting all the attention it should, but please make sure we do make some bids.
And you've got
Stuart, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, and I'm so conscious of your wanting to move quickly. I just wanted to raise a point. I think we might have shot past it unless I've lost my place somewhere, regarding schools and school transport. May I quickly do that, please?
Yeah, okay.
Because we're in the summer holidays at the moment. Every single one of us will notice how quiet the roads become. So therefore, the opposite of that is there must be a huge amount of pollution and congestion and other issues.
Yeah, there are.
And I'm one of those, of course, I have in my ward very congested historic centres around schools. I believe, and there is no answer I'm expecting this evening, but I would like us to please, when I'm looking at the actions that we're doing, I believe we can do far, far more regarding school travel. For example, and I've raised this with Ruth before, I don't expect her to be able to have a quick answer this evening. Some schools, if one literally closed roads around the school, then parents would not be able to park within yards of the school with their engines running. They would have to park further away. You increase the radius around the school, they'd have to park and walk with their little darling children, which probably do them a world of good, the last few hundred meters to school, or encourage more walking buses, or possibly encourage schools to take other initiatives.
Yeah, now, that is part of the engagement strategy, actually, is to bring in schools, and this is very much what we will have to discourage. I think closing roads is very difficult because, of course, people want to pass through at the same time. So, but I think that discouragement, certainly, I think we can do that, and I think we want to try and make sure that schools see this as a sort of some various issues we have with that, how they can actually help. And one of the biggest ways they can help is to discourage this whole parking of cars and certainly leaving engines running and things like that. I mean, I'm very conscious of it in my ward, and I'm sure everybody is within theirs.
Chairman, I may ask to keep an open mind on the road closure, because some boroughs do that. And all I'm saying is there might be some cases where, and I use it as deliberately as a dramatic kind of idea, because either we mean business with this or we don't. But I think there's far more we can do, and that's the point I wanted to make. And I'm hoping I will take it up within my own ward, of course, with the appropriate teams. But I'm just for this committee saying, I really think that there must be a huge amount of fuel used and wasted.
Yeah, I think it is a problem, and there's no question about it being a problem. I just think it's a question we need to think of at length how we deal with it, because I think just simply closing a road, for example, means that people cannot get out of their houses to go to work, for example, and that sort of thing.
You can allow residents through. But
if you allow residents through and you do that, then you've got the question of how you police all that, you see. So we need to think it through quite in detail. Can we move on? So I think the next question really is, or next section deals with securing new tree growing spaces, and so on, and actually increasing our canopy and encouraging people to grow their own, that sort of thing. All of that, I think, is going reasonably well. But again, obviously, if anyone has any particular points they want to make, we're open to that. Section 8.
Okay, move on, Chairman.
Yeah. And section 9, of course, is really the question of encouraging business to take part. Part of that will definitely be, definitely a big part of our engagement strategy. We'll return to that in due course, but you can see that we are trying to do it anyway as well. So I think that speaks for itself. And section 10 is our engagement section, so we're not going to deal with that now. We're going to deal with that when we get into it. So I think that is fairly clear. And then if we finally we talk about the flood risks and all the rest of it, and working with other risk management authorities, again, that is part of the engagement thing, but we are doing that, and I think that's still at an early stage, but it's something we've got to deal with. We've got to be much quicker, I think, on our feet. We've got to really, for example, I mean, when I see things that Southern Water have been up to recently, I'm absolutely disgusted, and I think that we've got to really start to put pressure on some of the statutory undertakers in particular to be far more environmentally conscious. But Vince, did you want to say anything else at this stage?
Yes, please. Thank you. Just a quick and colleagues would have seen, both the tragic images in mainland Europe, and of course more recently over the weekend, the pretty shocking footage of the flooding in East London. I mean, these are not made up things. These are things which are happening right now. So I wondered, as part of this, whether through the LGA and others, whether there will be specific lessons learned from both the East London situation, but also whether we're learning from colleagues across local government and municipalities across Europe, because that has been, you know, lives have been lost. And then, you know, not in our continent, but then we see that the hottest temperatures ever in Central and North America. And again, people losing their lives, all as a direct result of climate
failure to address the issues in time.
No, well, and that's the key really for us. So again, of course, and East London this weekend could be North Kent next weekend. That's the reality of it. So I guess for me, and we're not going to have all the solutions tonight, but I think if we weren't to at least recognise that and say, actually, and I know the hard-working officers will be doing this, but I think from our perspective, whether we do need to, and I know we talked at the last meeting, rather than, I know it's been right to go through the plan tonight, but at future meetings, I think we talked about having specific focused items to bring forward. And I would actually like us, it happens to be the very last item in the plan, but actually that kind of extreme weather impact on Medway, I'd like us to have a conversation about that as soon as practically possible, but certainly making sure that we take the lessons learned from those recent examples to ensure as much as we can that our plan is fit for purpose, and is recognising the you know, what were once in a lifetime incidents, they're regrettably becoming far more regular. Thank you.
Well, this is part of our emergency planning, and actually, I know it's a long thing here to study, but actually it is mentioned in detail under 11 as to the contacts that we're making, and I think that's all part of that work, isn't it?
And Howard, if I could just add, I would eat my hat, I think, if COP26 didn't discuss exactly that. So how the streams of weather have struck across Europe, Australia as well, around the world, and as Vince has said, even here as well, in some of the extreme weather, extreme flooding that we've seen too. If the leaders at COP26 don't reference that as an actual manifestation of climate change, I would be amazed, and I'm sure that will be the beginning, the start point of a number of conversations around what measures need to be put in place as a result to be able to live with that whilst we seek to address climate change.
Yeah, what we will do, and this is something I hope that Richard, you make sure happens, is that when we've had COP26, we will review that in the light of our plan. So there ought to be a specific and fairly short item on what are the major decisions or commitments that have been made, and how do we envisage making sure that those apply in Medway. Okay. Now then, if I may, because I realise time is getting on now, but I'd like to move on to the communications and engagement plan. So really, Celia, the floor is yours.
Right, good afternoon, Councillor. Just wanted to double check how we're doing for time, and because obviously I've got a presentation I can talk the group through, but I'm just conscious of how long you'd like me to talk for at this stage.
Well, how long do you need? That's as simple as that, really.
Well, the presentation will probably take about 15-20 minutes, and then open for discussion. But
okay, yes, do that. Do that. We've got to do that. This is a very important piece of work.
Thank you. Right. So first up, can everybody see my screen, the screen presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a good start. Right, so good evening, everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm Celia Glynn-Williams. I'm Head of Communications and Marketing at the Council. We've been working now for a while with our colleagues in the climate change team, and I think sort of some really good teamwork happening already. I think it's fair to say, we've already done quite a bit. You've seen some of the work happening, and we've got, for example, some really good social media pages set up. We're doing quite a lot of work through our website. We've been putting quite a lot of information also into areas like Medway Matters as well. So that work's already been in place. But obviously, what we're looking now is sort of move this onto a much more sort of structured approach and a sort of fulsome approach. So sort of we're moving full steam ahead. You've got sort of a summary of some of these comments in the document, in the Word document, or the PDF document that came through to you. But I just really wanted to talk you through them today. Right. So I mean, you know, and this is kind of how we would structure any sort of big comms and engagement strategy. But so in terms of the aims, I mean, obviously, yeah, we've got a bit of a sort of a virtuous circle, if you like, of aims. Firstly, it's about making people aware that they understand our journey to net carbon zero. That's really important that we kind of get out there, and we've got a really good story to tell now, and particularly with the action plan in place, we're sort of starting to motor ahead and getting that out into the wider public. But I know some way to go. We want to inspire people. We want to inspire people to get engaged and involved, and then from there we want people to feel empowered to then take action and also own individual responsibility to actually get on and do their bit. We want to encourage change. We want to encourage through behaviour change campaigns. We want to bring about change in people. And then obviously, as we go through that cycle, we want, as that change starts to happen, it's really important that we sort of evaluate all the way through. We've talked about that a little bit this evening, about sort of monitoring what's actually happening, and just so we can always evaluate how we're actually doing in our comms, but also in our actions as well. And then from that, we sort of continue to promote and raise the profile of what the council is doing, but also about what others are doing, again, across our community. So in terms of the approach that we'd be taking, there would be a clear call to action in all of our work, whatever we're doing in any sort of communications. You know, we always want to say, you know, so what can you do next, or we'd like you to do this. We want it to be very positive. All of our communications must be positive. It shouldn't be dwelling on the negative, you know, focusing on, you know, showing the value of behaviour change, doing things differently. And also not sort of coming back to this sort of guilt, making people feel guilty or uncomfortable that they might still be driving a diesel car, because actually we want them to have their next car to be an electric car, for example. So no green shaming. It's going to be very much built on the positive messages as well. We want people to feel part of the solution and not the problem. So, you know, what can they do next to actually, you know, make that change? All the information that we do, we want it to be factual, not political, but just very based on fact and changes and things like that. We want to make sure that everything that we do is accessible and inclusive. So we make sure that we take in all of our communities. We want to empower people, make sure that all of our communications are empowering, making people feel, you know, that they are capable of making these important changes. And finally, but very importantly, we need to make sure that any of the work that we're doing, any of our communications, is very clearly branded with our Medway Council. You've seen this of the lovely image that we've got, and that we will continue to use that. But also, where relevant, link into the Kent Green Action as well. Our messages are really important, and I think, you know, I've just sort of summarised some of these here, which is that we have some very ambitious plans to tackle climate change, and we need to act as a community. It's not just the council doing it on its own, but it's actually we all need to sort of, you know, everybody to do their bit. We want to ensure that people are aware of the fact that everything we do now will benefit the generations to come, and I think that's a really important message. It's a very difficult one, isn't it, to sort of encourage people, certainly as sort of my generation, to sort of take this change, you know, because they might not be thinking we're here to benefit from it, but actually it's really important that we're doing this for all the future generations to come through after us. It's important that we can sort of show how we can reduce, you know, through reducing the impact of climate change, will help, you know, the recovery of nature. And linked to that also, you know, any sort of, you know, the actions that we take now will help to create and develop new jobs and new infrastructure as well, you know, more forward-thinking, digitally enabled infrastructure, and additional benefits that will come from climate change as well, whether that's health, you know, and also sort of, you know, ensuring that sort of for our younger people are much more involved and engaged in that debate. And also, you know, the very important message around the fact that we at Medway have an action plan. And then the question for other people is, what will you do as well? So those are what we're seeing as our key messages. So who are we going to be aiming this at? Well, there are a number of stakeholder groups. We've started to encapsulate them into a number of sort of different areas, and obviously all of the different stakeholder groups will have different elements. So if we kind of start off at 9 o'clock, because obviously a lot of this work we're doing for our residents across Medway, and if you like, we can you know, subdivide those down even further, and we will have these sort of this work done. But, you know, for example, we know some are already engaged, some are partially engaged, we know some are completely disengaged. And then there are older or younger residents, more vulnerable, disabled, or there are people from the sort of different communities, ethnic communities as well. So there are different sort of groupings, and we'll target our communications depending on who we're trying to target for any bits of this work. And then you'll see from the other groups, there are councillors. Obviously, we want to make sure all our councillors are fully engaged in this, MPs, partners and interest groups, council staff. We've put here education. I think that's really, really important one. When we talk about education, it's both in terms of schools and the universities and the further education college as well. So, you know, they will be an important group in their own right. And then also younger people. So, you know, whether in education or not, you know, it's really important that we engage with them, because they very often they do sort of, you know, carry the banner for climate change, you know, across their communities and within their families as well. We want to work with businesses and how we, you know, and the way we reach them. Community groups, incredibly important, because we know that, you know, many of our community groups are already very well engaged in things like litter picks, and we really want to sort of get them involved. And also we've got all our, very importantly, the visitors to Medway as well. We want to make sure that they understand that we are taking the climate change agenda very seriously here in Medway. In the document that you've got, I put a little bit more information about some of the actions, and we'll come on to talk a little bit about those, you know, about whether it's sort of the 3, 6 and the 9 and 12-month plans as well. So I won't go through them in every single detail, but as you can see, we've started to put together some engagement activities. By no means is this an exhaustive list. Very happy to take your ideas as well. But these are, you know, just some of the ideas that we've started to come up with. And the great thing is, if we start to do this work, you know, undoubtedly many of these groups will come forward with their own ideas, and this is kind of exactly what we want. So looking at kind of stakeholder groups and governance, I mean, one of the things that we've been looking at is, you know, we have the member advisory group established now, as we are here this evening, and we are establishing a number of sort of officer subgroups. And our thinking at the moment is to establish a new sort of Medway Climate Action Group with a number of different groupings sort of to filter into that from our sort of community network. So this becomes really very much our climate change network as well. So you know, all sorts of groups, as you can see all the way down there, sort of technical, school, education, charities, business networks, and then underneath those you've then got sort of technical group, for example, the universities, the academics. You've got under schools, we've got governors and head teachers, public sector. There's obviously, we're already very well engaged with a lot of those as well. So I won't go through all this, it's a fairly exhaustive list, but there's an awful lot of people that we can and should be engaging with. And there's all sorts of really exciting ways that we can start to engage with these people as well. We've sort of taken a look at a number of other really good examples. I just wanted to share some of them with you today. And although we haven't got time to kind of look at all of the websites, I would sort of urge you to take a look. So Reading, for example, have set up their Reading Can network. It's a really, really useful website there with all the sort of different subgroupings there as well, depending on who you are, whether you're schools or whether you're businesses. And then within these, they've got lots of incredibly helpful hubs full of resources and information and events and things like that. So that kind of works extremely well. Manchester, the Zero Carbon Manchester website, again, is a fantastic example. And they've just recently launched something called the In Our Nature campaign, which is a superb campaign of getting the whole community working together to create a sort of cleaner, greener, healthier, connected Manchester. And it's got lots of tips, ideas, money-saving ideas on there as well. So very kind of energetic. And then Haringey, for example, when they sort of launched their action plan, they did a lot of work, again, engaging local people. They put a website in place to actually sort of secure ideas and seek ideas from the community as well about different activities and ideas. So there are plenty of options there for us to look at. In terms of the channels, we have a lot of very good channels, very well exercised channels already within our reach here at Medway. I mean, obviously we've talked a little bit about the website, and we've developed already sort of quite a lot of information on our website, but we see that really starting to move that over the next 6 months into a kind of a much bigger, really a hub for information as well. So we'd have again, we can sort of develop it depending on with a lot of information and resources for all of our different stakeholder groups, whether it's the resources for schools, resources for businesses, ideas that people can do, suggestions for our small change activities as well. So plenty of things that we can do on there. And also we create a dashboard on there. We've been talking a bit about evaluation. So actually, what could we do? We can sort of say, so this is how we're getting on, on this action, that action. Are we doing, or maybe have a sort of a RAG type approach, a red, amber, green type approach. So making it as easy as possible for people to access it, and also making our action plan, because at the moment it stands at over 100 pages, and I think that
we've got to have a summary and
going to be able to read it. So we're going to put a summary onto that as well. So plenty of toolkits. We look at doing our social media pages already sort of well established, and actually we've been already held up for as a public exemplar for some really great social media engagement that we're doing on that. So that's we're really pleased with that, and that will just continue. We have e-newsletters as well that we've launched. We should be doing more with videos. I mean, clearly people are very excited about videos. Videos are such a good way to engage with people. We don't have to read reams of information. So, it's lovely to have sort of, people talking on videos or action. So, and again, it particularly is good in engaging with our younger audiences as well. We'll put campaign calendars up, so what's coming up, so that if we're creating new campaigns, we can put those on the website, for example, and others in our communities, our community groups, for example, can actually start to use those as well. We could put, for example, shareable social media posts, so that actually they can just take those and they can put them on their own social media sites as well, so that everything can be shared across Medway. Undoubtedly, we have our own festival and events calendar, and I think we should be doing more, have more of a greater presence in those as well. And I'm sure that we've touched already on, sort of said in 12 months' time we'd like to do a community event. I think that would be a super idea if we can do, bringing more people in. And then obviously Medway Matters, we're fully committed to updating that as well, and having updates in that every quarter. PR will be a very big part of our work as well, working particularly with local media. I'd like to sort of work with Matt Ramsden at the Medway Messenger just to make sure that they actually become champions for climate change as well across Medway. And I think there's a lot more that they can and we can all do together on that one, as well as working with trade media. And I want to sort of make sure that we've also got our own USP in Medway. What makes us stand out, so that gives us the opportunity to secure some national and some trade media as well. So quite a lot of work we want to really do around media. It won't be without its challenges, I think it's fair to say, however. So, I think, I just think it's one of the things to sort of point out, and I've just put some images here to try and to illustrate that, I suppose. So the gentleman pushing the boulder uphill, I think that's relating to Medway Council, actually. I think it's really important that kind of, from the very off, we're sort of out and about trying to work and engage with as many in our community as we possibly can. In Medway, we are responsible for 1.4% of all the emissions that happen in Medway. We are only part of the solution with that, and it's important that others are engaged and everybody's trying to do their bit and doing stuff. We also have people who are people not involved, not engaged, they don't care, it's not really kind of their bag, they've got other busier things to do. How are we going to engage those people? That's one of our challenges we face. We've got a very busy post-it note board there, because we're all incredibly busy people. How are we going to make sure that we do this? We've got a very ambitious action plan, and also a lot of other stuff to do. So we've got to just make sure that we kind of take it in bite-sized chunks, and we are very realistic about what can be achieved within the timeframes that we're setting as well, and not set ourselves up to fail with this. And we need to make sure that we've got the right resources on board to do it. And then the final group is obviously the climate change deniers. There are still our climate change deniers up there. So that's part of the PR challenge that we face, to try and encourage those people to get more on board and do their bit. And then I've touched also on evaluation and the importance of evaluation. So we will be evaluating from the communications perspective all the way through. So we will be monitoring and collecting data from all the work that we do to evaluate the success of a campaign. I think we should be probably looking at doing a public perception survey annually, focusing on residents' attitudes to it, so that we can actually then, as well as sort of understanding how our climate or our emissions are going down, actually how are we changing people's views? Very wrong. Social media, you know, we can monitor our reach and engagement with posts and video views. We have website analytics that can tell us, which is incredibly helpful, because then that means that we can work out where we're losing people, where we're not getting the information they need, and we can actually make adjustments real time on that. And we can do the same with social media as well. From our staff perspective, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, staff are fully engaged with this whole project. You know, for example, we want to update our induction. So, you know, what can we do around there just to make sure they're doing their bit? And obviously any event numbers and attendance, you know, that we're doing on that, we can sort of monitor through there. So that's kind of just in a nutshell, just sort of some of the things that we're proposing. It's at a very top level at the moment, because we haven't got a huge amount of time this evening, but we've got some questions from you really, in terms of we'd welcome your ideas on how do we encourage a shift in behaviour, and how can, you know, everybody lead by example? Yeah? How can we make sure that the council and councillors are all listening effectively? Are there any of the tools that you've sort of seen or heard and you think we could use to build more meaningful relationship with people as well? How do we best use the knowledge of our communities and our partners, and what other opportunities are there out there that we can sort of build our communities as well? So really, that's just some questions from you. We've put together the sort of a proposed action list that you've got access to on the document. So I'll stop sharing this now, if you like, and then we can open that up for debate.
Okay. I think it's a very good idea. Thank you for that summary. I think the other thing I just wanted to check with you, will you be leading on this, or will we have we'll have one particular person in the comms team that will be actually sort of leading this for you?
Well, I'm kind of the overall person responsible for this, but I'm delighted to say that also Lynette Godwin is also very heavily involved in this one as well. So she's got that. She's actually listening in on the call as well today. So so she's involved. But also the way that we work in the communications team is we have, you know, a number of people who are responsible, so, you know, for different areas. So obviously we have our press team, we have people in our design team, and we have internal communications as well. So, you know, across the range. And so what I'm going to put in place is a sort of a small core group within communications. And then we also have a broader group for a communications group across a lot of other council services, specifically on climate change as well. So we're kind of covering it in different ways.
Okay, can I just make one other comment, and then I'll throw it open to everybody. Basically, what we will need to do, obviously, in the early days, is to meet as a communications group. We need to make sure that, you know, you get all the help you need, etc., etc. And I've asked, because of the sheer amount of work on this, I've asked Councillor Potter, and also I've asked I've got a checklist for the leader, and because I think it needs a younger member of the council really to espouse this communication plan, because they're going to be much more part of the result of this if we get it wrong, if I can put it bluntly. They've got a bigger stake in it than, say, I have, for example, or many of the people around the table. So I think we need to, I will sit in obviously in the initial meetings of the communications network group, but I think what we need now is to get on with this, and you obviously will need some reference point with members, and I suggest that what we have is a sort of subgroup really that that we actually can form and gradually add to that, so that we get, you know, an overview of communication. We'll have some people from the public and so on, and it's something which I think, you know, we need to put that together properly, so it actually communicates downwards and upwards. You know, so it feeds back to the main committee when we need to make changes in the way we're doing things.
I think that's a great idea. And if I could also just reassure you, Howard, that I am probably one of the older members of the team, and we have plenty of 23, 24-year-olds in our team. They'll be giving me plenty of advice.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking of your team particularly. I was thinking actually of particularly making sure that the lead really for it on the member side was commensurate with that as well. Anyhow, I'll now throw this open to discuss. What do people think? Stuart, I think, has started. Off you go, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you very much. And my first impressions of the plan and the ideas is excellent. I mean, I think it's covered a very broad spectrum, and talking to the right people. And I love the idea of engagement. I wonder if I could just pick up on the business engagement side of things, as you probably expect from me. This is something that particularly fascinates me. And as it happens, my son heads sustainability for a very large national construction firm, so I'm always picking his brains on, how they do things. And one of the things that surprises me, perhaps it doesn't surprise me that much because I've got used to it, is how much money businesses save by getting these things right. You can cut costs and improve efficiency. They look at the transport of products and a whole bunch of different things. And within our businesses and organisations, I'm very sure there will be many who would love to share some of that expertise, with other people, and they're happy to do so. Now, unfortunately, my son doesn't live in this neck of the woods anymore, but there will be people like him all over the place who have expertise and will happily share it. So I would really encourage, because we won't within the council have all of this knowledge, but there will be people out there. And so anything you can do through this communications to bring out the very best ideas to make things better for Medway, I think will be fantastic. But the big message for me is that, the green message is actually also business efficiency.
It is. No doubt about that. Right. Anybody else would like to contribute?
Nobody else on the board, Chairman?
Well, I just wondered whether, I think, Celia, you stunned them into silence.
Great presentation. It was a brilliant presentation. Well done, Celia.
But I just wanted to make sure, I mean, by all means, do reflect on this. And if you do have any ideas, please do share them. This is not a one-man band effort or indeed a one-woman band effort. Basically, we're putting ideas to you in the same way that we've done with the action plan. It's not a question of us locking horns to find out what we should or should not be doing. It's a question really of developing something which is, as well as a lot of people have engaged in it in a lot of different ways, and we've got to make sure that we try and get that message out, particularly in communications. I think that we shall gradually develop that communicating machine, as it were, and I think that's something that we've all got to contribute to. So I think that the sooner if we get together, I'll make suggestions as to who would like to be on that communications group. But if any of you would like to be on it, I think we want probably about 2 or 3 more members so that we actually can get on with it quickly. Obviously, someone like, for example, Simon Curry is one I think of, and I don't know, Stuart, whether you would like to be on it as well. But I think that's the sort of, I'm only suggesting that, but by all means, come to your own conclusion.
I'd be delighted to have that use.
Right, thank you. How about you, Simon?
Thanks, Chair. Not a problem. Happy to be part of that.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Okay, well, we'll get on with that, and obviously we'll report into you as the main group. And it's going to be a tough ask, but we're going to get on with it. Okay, well, unless anyone else has anything. Oh yes, sorry, there is one other little thing. We say a little thing. It's not a little thing. It's we had a petition with regard to trees, if you remember, and we have actually written back, and there's a copy of the letter, I think, with your papers, which does actually reassure the complainant that we are getting on with this, and we are doing quite a lot of work in that area. And that was further amplified in the notes on the action plan. So I don't know that's really for you for information. Okay. So thank you all for your patience and attendance. Thank you particularly, Celia, for all your work that you've done on this, you and your team. I think you've done a superb job, actually. And I do congratulate you. Thank you. So that's a really good start. So thank you very much, and we'll now close the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chairman.